Abercrombie and Fitch was 100% that girl. Just ask any millennial. I enjoyed my time as an employee for the brand, and I had no idea it had such a bad rep. Let's talk about it. Abercrombie and Fitch, or A&F as I'm going to call it throughout this video, was an early to mid 2000s preteen to early adults dream. I grew up in LA, and if you know anything about A&F, that's basically their brand. Beaches. Maybe not LA beaches because they be a little dirty, but when you think of A&F, you're thinking about beaches. And if you're a kid who grew up in a beach city or in close proximity to a beach city like me, then you were always at the beach. And if you didn't grow up in a beach city, you wanted to. And that's the dream that the A&F brand was selling at the time. It was very much fraternity. I'm legacy at an Ivy League. My parents sent me off to boarding school, but I'm home for the summer. Like, that was the vibes that A&F gave. And though I didn't personally notice it at the time, it was a very white brand. We talking Wonder Bread.
Retailers seek out workers whose look they feel will sell clothes, but can maintaining that look become a form of racial discrimination? That's what the firm of Abercrombie and Fitch is being accused of.
But I do have a different take on why I didn't see it as this overly white brand. Hear me out. So something that is interesting about racism for me, I have rarely ever experienced it outright. Texturism, colorism, I've experienced those all day up and down. I could tell you exactly what that looks like, what that feels like. But racism, I haven't experienced that too much. So I don't really think my mind as a 13 to however old you are when you're wearing Abercrombie and Fitch, I don't think my mind would have automatically gone to, OMG, this brand is so white and it's racist because it's white. Like, I would never look at their marketing and be like, where are the black people at? Because I didn't think in terms of lack of representation or in terms of racial bias, I guess. I also grew up in a very diverse Los Angeles, went to very diverse schools, and had a very diverse friend group pretty much all my life, and now. So I just didn't think in those terms because that wasn't my experience. Maybe if I would have grown up in Mississippi or Louisiana, I would have been like, this brand is racist because that would have been the culture that I grew up in, I would assume. And actually, I'm not assuming because I did live in Louisiana for a little bit, and it's very much given Louisiana. No shade to anybody from Louisiana. All my family's from Louisiana, but I did go to school there for a little bit, and it felt segregated. Of course, I'm not saying that the higher-ups at A&F were not biased in some kind of way. Clearly, we're going to get into some racist things that the brand did, that the higher-ups approved. But I'm just saying, looking at it flat out, looking at the branding, looking at how they marketed the brand, I never felt that way before, during, or after my time working there. The way that I viewed it is that they were literally selling this dream of this beach life. Flip-flops, cool shorts, loud music, and smelling good. They were selling this dream and this image of the cool kid with wealthy parents. And in my real life, all of the kids who were cool with wealthy parents were white. So my reality lined up with what A&F was selling. So for me, there was no mismatch. It was actually a great representation of what my life was. I actually remember in high school, I had this sweater that said Holly on one side, and then it was the zipper, and then it said wood. Instead of saying Hollister, because as we'll talk about, Hollister is a brand that's owned by overall A&F. Same vibes, it's just it's different target audience. Younger preteens. Abercrombie and Fitch was for young adults. So I had this sweater, it was blue. I remember this sweater so vividly because of what I'm about to tell y'all happened. It was like this aqua blue, it said Hollywood on it. And the exact type of guy who you would expect to be in a Hollister ad was the guy who noticed that it was fake. And he was like, why does your sweater say Hollywood? And I was like, shut the fuck up, Connor. That's his real name. His real name was actually Connor. I wonder what he's doing right now. Probably shitting on people for not being able to afford name brand clothes. He's probably not doing, I don't know what the fuck he's doing. Haven't seen him since high school. Hey y'all, it's Nae. Welcome back to my little corner of YouTube. This video will contain spoilers for White Hot, The Rise and Fall of Abercrombie and Fitch, documentary on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it yet and you do not want spoilers, save this video and come back after you do. You are about to hear my thoughts on the documentary, but as always, I want to hear yours. So feel free to drop your thoughts below if you do want to participate in the conversation, and give this video a like before you go so I know you enjoyed it. I cannot discuss this documentary without acknowledging my very real and present bias even to this day. I work for Abercrombie and Fitch. More specifically, I worked for the Hollister Co brand for several years. And you know, Hollister is like A&F's younger cool little sister, so that's me. To this day, I love the music that was played in Hollister. And I actually probably owe it to Hollister that my music taste is as eccentric as it is, because they would play all kind of stuff that I never would have listened to had I not worked there. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I have a Spotify account where I just like to create playlists because I like sharing music with people. And sometimes I'll create a playlist. It's not a playlist, it's very free. It's very free. Sometimes I'll create a playlist to pair pair with the video that I do. So I felt that it was only right to kind of pair my old Hollister playlist with this video, because I still listen to that. Like every once in a while I'd be like, I want to hear some Hollister music, and I just hit that playlist. So I'm adding that playlist to my Spotify account for YouTube, and y'all can feel free to check that out. It'll be linked below, as it always is. It's basically all the music from the time that I worked there, a little before and also a little bit after, because like I said, I genuinely, like, when people would be like, who listens to the music that they play? Me. I listen to the type of music that they play in Hollister. I'm that girl. Now, I am a bit of a history nerd. I'm terrible at remembering dates. Like, don't ask me any dates. Don't be like, what year? I don't know. I don't know what year. But I love learning about history. Pretty much love learning about the history of anything, really. And as some of you know, I went to business school. I have a marketing degree. So when it comes to learning anything about how a business works and the decisions that a business makes, good or bad, I'm all about it, because I just love that side of being like, ooh, they did this for a business plan, or they did. I just love learning about stuff like that. I learned a lot about the history of A&F watching this documentary, and I learned a lot about some of the business practices that they had. I had no idea that they started out as this outdoorsy brand selling, I don't know, golf clubs and kayaks and stuff, basically like a Big Five or a Dick's Sporting Good. Learning that little piece of information made me feel as excited as I felt when I learned that Amazon used to be an online bookseller. Jeff Bezos owns almost everything in my house. My camera is from Amazon. As I'm looking around, I'm like, that's from Amazon, that's from Amazon, my phone case is from Amazon, my headphones are from Amazon. I also didn't realize that A&F had catalogs, and that they were really kind of selling sex in the way that they were, and also that they were selling such an open depiction of gay men.
It was clear to anyone who was paying attention that there were many gay men involved in all of it. I think the brilliance of the brand was that that was like went right over the head of their target customer, like the straight college frat pro.
The main photographer, Bruce Weber, was a gay man and infused that into the branding for A&F. And when I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, that branding was very, very gay, but I didn't think that at the time. I just thought they were hot straight guys. Yeah, I guess I didn't really know too many gay people at that time, so why would I think that? And A&F had their target audience down to a T. They knew that dream that they were selling that I talked about, and they knew exactly who they were selling it to. But again, from a business side, I gotta respect that. They figured out how to sell to everybody, even though they didn't like everybody. On a side note about Bruce Weber though, why did they hint at this man making people disappear and then not elaborate on that?
There was a guy that would get a call from Bruce. He would get invited to come over for dinner. Like, hey, you should come over, I'm gonna have dinner, play with my dogs, blah, 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 and then they would go over, and then I would not see them the next day.
I feel like outside of the racism that they touched on, they should have 100% been like, let's explore more why people were disappearing after going to his house, but I guess that wasn't important enough. So I can't even talk about it because they didn't talk about it, and I didn't know that man, so I don't know if any of that is true or if it's just allegations or what the situation is. Now let's talk about this racial bias and the fact that they were forced to create a DEI officer position. This is interesting because at this current point right now in America, we have just rolled back affirmative action. Every once in a while I get someone watching who's not from the US, so I'll explain briefly what affirmative action is. Affirmative action requires schools and businesses basically to let in a certain amount of marginalized people every year, basically. Now, Black people are often the face of affirmative action because people will be like, oh, we need to hire more Black people, or we need to let more Black people into college. But it doesn't just benefit Black people, and I think that's where people went wrong when they did want to overturn affirmative action. They were like, well, we're tired of Black people getting into things, and they didn't realize that it's also going to affect Asian people and Hispanic people and disabled people. Affirmative action was covering everybody, not just Black people, but again, we are often the face of it, as we are often, I don't want to go down a tangent, but Black people are all often in America thrown under the bus for getting too many things or wanting to take advantage of too many things. So it's only right, not fair, but only right that we would also be the face of basically being called moochers for affirmative action when it also benefits other people too, but I digress. But I actually do believe I just saw that Harvard admitted its fewest number of Black students since the 1960s, which is actually just a small testament to how much progress we've actually made as a society, but that's a conversation for another time. Now, A&F was found to be under hiring anyone who wasn't white. So they were forced to hire someone to force them to basically diversify their employee pool. Of course, that person was a Black man. It's always like a Black person or a woman that they hired to diversify stuff, to make it look like they're diversifying. And of course, that role was only created after they were caught being very, very racist. Some of the managers in the documentary spoke about this book that they would have to send to corporate office of their already hired employees. So these are people who already on the schedule, already working. They would have to send in their pictures and basically give them a rating. I believe it was from cool to rocks, which rocks are pretty fucking... rocks are pretty fucking cool. So I don't know why that was the whatever. Maybe they didn't see any pretty rocks in their life, but they would make them rate them. And then the people who were at the headquarters would be like, this person ain't cute enough. Go ahead and phase them out. This person ain't cute enough. Go ahead. Or this person isn't the look that we're going for. And it just so turned out that 9 times out of 10, it was the non-white people.
You have to rank all your employees on the scale of like cool to rocks. And if they aren't at least cool, then you have to zero them out off the schedule. It didn't matter what your sales were. All that mattered was that the employees that you took pictures of and sent back to headquarters were hot. Clearly this is illegal, right?
And then, of course, they fired almost every Asian that worked at, I believe it was their UCI location, which I know where that is. Which you shouldn't need someone to tell you that firing all of your Asian employees is wrong. But apparently they needed someone to tell them that firing all of their Asian employees was wrong.
We're notified by a note saying if you don't have a paycheck, you've been let go for the season. But then we talked to our assistant manager who's Asian American. He said the real reason is because one of the people from corporate went around and they noticed a bunch of Asian people in the store. They said, well, you need to have more staff that looks like this. And they pointed to an Abercrombie poster, and it was a Caucasian model.
But as this guy so eloquently said,
themes started to emerge of this strong preference for white people.
Another huge reason that A&F was required to hire this DEI officer was because of their racist graphic tees. Now, when I think of A&F, when I think of Hollister, when I think of Gilly Hicks, which is, no one ever talks about Gilly Hicks, but Gilly Hicks, I don't know if it exists now. Let's see. Gilly Hicks was basically Abercrombie and Fitch's Victoria's Secrets. I never really saw too many out in the wild, but every once in a while at my Hollister location, we would sell Gilly Hicks items. Gilly Hicks, oh, are they still in business? Oh, they've just combined it with Hollister. Yeah, it used to be like a separate thing, but yeah, they do still sell Gilly Hicks. Wow. They sell like activewear now. No one ever talks about Gilly Hicks. I feel like that's like a distant memory that I only have because I work for the brand. But yeah, when I think of A&F, when I think of Hollister, when I think of a Gilly Hicks, I think of a few things. Loud music, strong smells, the beach, the shopping bags, and graphic tees. And for the most part, I remember the graphic tees, actually for the all part, I remember the graphic tees being really fun, not racist. And before you jump on me, a lot of this stuff was going on, like the racism part of the brand was going on in 2002. I was literally still in elementary school, so obviously I wasn't working there at that time. So all of this stuff, this racist stuff that really happened is kind of before my time at the company, and maybe that's why I didn't really know about it, because as I'll mention a little later, they started to make changes by the time I got there. There was the situation of this shirt
advertising a fictional laundry service. The slogan was, "Two Wongs can make it white,"
which is very obviously prejudiced at best, racist at worst, and it is racist. Something that I thought was interesting about this shirt is that you would never see something about this like black people. I think that in America there's such a prominent history of black people being discriminated against that if somebody put something like fried chicken and watermelon on a shirt, we would know that they were doing that shit on purpose to be racist. But I don't think that in 2002 or whenever they actually sat down to create this shirt, I don't think that racism against Asian Americans was acknowledged in the way that we obviously know it happens now. Ever since 2020, we are all put on notice that it happens. But I don't think people really knew, and so making a shirt that says two wrongs can make it white probably didn't feel as bad, because it's like, no, it's not racism against black people, so it's not real racism.
Pop culture Orientalism, right? It's all this stuff taken from people's understanding of Asians if you just watched American TV and movies.
So at that time, a lot of people wouldn't have looked twice at that shirt. Whereas if you made that now, you know better. And it's unfortunate. And I also won't speak too much on this because obviously I'm not Asian. But in speaking with some of my Asian friends and hearing racism in America from their perspective, they've told me that a lot of Asian people who came to America took the route of assimilation, which basically means aligning themselves closer to whiteness. Much like black women who straighten their hair or start to bleach their skin, it's like you're trying to get in closer proximity to whiteness so that white people aren't racist to you, or so that they don't view you as, one of those type of black people, one of those type of Asian people on some they not like us type shit. And what really made me think of this was when I heard that this shirt, as it was going through its rounds of approval, there were 2 Asian people in the room who also greenlit this shirt.
Whenever something like this happens, I always imagine in my mind a scenario where somebody, like, man, if they just had one person who was like, maybe this is not a good idea.
I had nothing to do with like whatever, but I will say this. 2 of the main team people were Asian Americans, which is why it got approved in the first place.
And you know what? I felt the same exact way when Pepsi tried to get rid of racism with a Jenner and a soda. Sorry, I can't fully let this play, obviously, because it has music in it that I'm gonna get flagged for, but I mean, just look at how ridiculous this is. She's at a photo shoot. This guy's like, hey, come join this protest instead. And she's like, I will come join this protest instead. And they got every minority they could think of, put it in this video, and literally tried to solve police brutality with a fucking Pepsi. And watching this shit again is just pissing me the fuck off because, yeah, you know what? Why didn't black people try that? I was like, let me apply to Pepsi immediately because clearly there was not one black person in the room when this ad got greenlit. I don't work at Pepsi, but I'm proud to say that the company that I do work at, I have been able to have my input on things like this. You know, sometimes it can be hard to speak out in a room where you are the only black person, let alone the only minority, in a room full of white people, to be like, you know, y'all are being a little tone deaf. And I'll say tone deaf more than racist, because just because someone is being tone deaf to me doesn't mean that they're racist. They literally just didn't realize that. And as long as they're willing to grow from that, then we're good. It's the people who don't want to change that are the problem. Another great point that was made throughout the documentary is that social media in 2002 did not exist. MySpace even a thing in 2002? Social media in 2002 did not exist, obviously, as it exists now. Had George Floyd or even Rona happened in 2002 versus 2020, it would not have seen the coverage that it got when we're all online. There may have very well been the same amount of people who were upset about it and just didn't know how to spread the word, and they can only talk about it to their friends, because how do you tell someone in another state that you don't know that you're upset about this shirt when being online or social media doesn't exist? Like, how would you're gonna write them a letter? Like, that wouldn't happen. So social media has also opened up a way for more conversation about these things to happen. You know, people always talk about, man, I feel like police brutality is happening so much lately. And on a small scale, it may be happening a little bit more, but more than likely what's happening is that you're just seeing it more because there's a phone and there's internet and there's social media. So it's always been happening. You just didn't know about it because you live in, you know, the middle of nowhere in Nebraska, and you're just not seeing what's going on in other states. In addition to that shirt, they had these insensitive or sexually charged shirts as well. So for all these reasons and probably more, A&F kind of forced itself to be open to being sued in litigation and to be forced by a court to implement DEI and start changing things. But you know, as someone pointed out, all of these changes were being made on the store level. And the closer you get to the top, the higher you climb the corporate ladder, the wider it gets. And I don't think that's any different than now, to be quite honest. If you look at most corporations, the makeup of the board or the C-suite, most of the makeup of that is going to be old white men. And that's just the reality. So I can't even really fault A&F for being that way. We are starting to make those changes now. As I said, you know, we're becoming a more conscious and aware society. But if you look at most corporations across the board, the C-suite, the CEOs, the leaders of the company are old white men. When you look at America, you look at the history of presidents, overwhelmingly old white men. When you look at Supreme Court, we probably have a better mix now, but when you look at it historically, old white men. That just is America. That is literally ingrained in America. So our political system, you know, reflects how our corporations are ran, obviously, because who's paying for the corporation, who's paying the politicians. I don't want to get too political, but y'all know what I mean. So I guess I kind of worked at Hollister during the sweet spot of when they were forced to implement all these changes and right before they fell out of style. And that could be why I never experienced any of this.
The shifts he made for the company were great in terms of a small period of time. I don't think any of that was sustainable. It didn't feel like there was a long-term strategy there.
I was hired during this model versus impact era.
So brand reps were no longer called brand reps. They were called either impact, and that meant that you went to the back, or model, and that meant you could be up front. Calling their minimum wage, retail employees, models. You know, Abercrombie could get away with anything that a modeling agency could get away with.
I actually applied for an impact position because I was like, I don't want to be a model. I didn't really know what it meant. So I applied for an impact position, got hired as a model. Now, this isn't a deep dive on pretty privilege or anything like that. I actually don't think I benefit too much from pretty privilege, but I acknowledge that I do have pretty privilege, right? And you know, I'm a pretty girl. Pretty privilege has probably benefited me in ways that I don't even know. It wasn't something that we as employees openly discussed, but it was definitely well known that if you were considered pretty, you worked in the actual store. And if you were considered less conventionally attractive, then you worked in the stockroom as an impact member. For me, working at Hollister was a vibe. I can't even lie, it was a vibe. Whenever someone asks me like, oh, what's been your favorite job ever? I always say Hollister because it is my favorite job. It's the best job I've ever had. And I always acknowledge that I was super young, no responsibilities, and I probably view that time from a very nostalgic, young, wild, and free POV as it is. And maybe that's why it feels that way. But I love working there. It felt like you were working at a nightclub because it was so loud. The guys were hot. I was hot. My coworkers were hot. The people who came into the store were hot. Like, it was a vibe. It was an era for me working there during that DEI sweet spot. The pay was shitty. We worked really crappy 4-hour shifts. We had super corny taglines. Whenever people would walk in, we would have to say, hey, what's up? But like, how fun is that for a 16-year-old to be like, you work at a place where you get to say, hey, what's up to people? Like, I was living a dream. Although one summer I do remember that they made the tagline welcome to the beach, and I hated that because the location that I worked at was nowhere near the beach, and people were always like, huh, what'd you say? And I'd just be like, never mind, just go shop. But it definitely did have this work hard, play harder environment that people in the documentary were talking about as well.
And the whole idea was that work was life and life was work, and everybody would pull these all-nighters because it was just like, you know, you were hanging out with your friends.
During closing shifts, we would blast our own music because obviously, you know, it's a very loud store, or used to be, and sing and dance along as we were closing the store. Actually, I think those closing shifts at Hollister is where my love of house music, trance music, and dubstep kind of was grown. Some of my managers were also, you know, young adults. I was a teen, but they were young adults, you know, in their early 20s, and they were in their rave eras. So they were playing house music, and I was like, this shit is kind of, let me learn how to shuffle. Like, I just only have good memories about working there. But then again, for that work hard, play hard, I remember that one of my regional managers actually was an Asian woman. And I really only remember her because she scared the shit out of me. She was very intimidating. She would come in and be like, your jeans are not folded properly, your size stickers are not aligned. And listen, not to toot my own horn, okay, but they used to be having me, the second that I turned 18, they were like, good, you could work 4 shifts. And they would always have me there because I was a good employee. I know how to fold. I knew how to do, I did everything to the T the way that it was supposed to be. And it's probably because I love my job there. That regional manager made sure that everything in her region was top notch. It was also true that they had this no black threads policy.
After she interviewed me, she called the district manager because I was wearing a black headscarf. At the time, they had a no black policy.
Hollister did not sell the color black because I guess they were going for this bright, airy, and fun type of thing, even though the store was very dark. So I don't know, but they didn't sell the color black. Funny enough, I remember when they started to transition to maybe like a darker navy blue to, I guess, cut down on the criticism of not selling the color black. I don't know if they're selling black now or not. I haven't actually purchased Hollister in a long time, but after this I'm gonna go get me some jeans because I remember they had some nice ass jeans. They also mentioned this story of this woman who left A&F to go work for A&E, American Eagle.
Asked, how'd you end up at American Eagle Outfitters? And she says, well, I was just a district manager for Abercrombie and Fitch, and then I moved over. And my colleague says, oh, that's interesting. It's a different, you know, a slightly different culture, trying to keep everybody brand positive. And this manager just starts crying, and she's like, I'm so happy here. I get to hire who I want. She gestures to the guy who's leading women to the dressing room, who's like a light-skinned black guy with dreadlocks.
And that made me really sad, you know, because obviously at the time for me working there, I was fully immersed in the A&F culture. I actually really hated American Eagle. In my eyes, they were posers who were wannabe Abercrombie and Fitch. So hearing that this manager basically had a culture shock and was like, oh no, I love that I can hire who I want here, was sad. And look, I'm not sharing my experience to invalidate anyone else's. Obviously, there were enough people who felt that way that they formed class action lawsuits about it. I feel like these days we rush to be like, oh, you're saying something that goes against what this person is saying, well then you're automatically saying that they're wrong. No, that's not what I'm saying. I think we really need to, for lack of a better phrase, touch some fucking grass. People can have different experiences, and my positive experience doesn't negate their negative experience no more than their negative experience negates my positive experience. Obviously, some people had a negative experience. Maybe I just lucked out and ended up at a great store. It could also be that. The store that I worked at, the managers who I worked with were amazing. Everybody was fun. Everybody was great. I didn't experience any racism, any prejudice, maybe from some of the customers. Now, some of the customers, I worked at a very fancy location, and it was basically like a touristy location. And when I say touristy, I don't mean people coming on vacation with, you know, their little kids to go to Disneyland. These are people who were coming on vacation from like overseas who had money. So I had people snap their fingers at me to get them fitting rooms. I had people like look me up and down. Like the first time I ever touched a Amex Black card was at Hollister. And the woman handed me the card and it fell out of my hand because I was just like, you know, I've never touched a black card before. So when it was heavy, I was like, what the fuck? And it fell out of my hand. That's the type of money these people had, okay? So yeah, if anything, I experienced prejudice from customers, not from employees or managers or anything like that. I will say this though, for years after I quit, I got settlement checks in the mail from class action lawsuits, not for discrimination or racism, but because people were saying that they were forced to work through their break. I never had to work through a break, but I guess because I worked there during that time, they would throw me a little 10 cent, 20 cent, $5 settlement check. If you've been on my channel before and you watch my videos, you know how I feel about cancel culture when it comes to not giving people the opportunity to grow. And I guess in this case, people or corporations. In most situations, not all, but in most situations, we have to give people the opportunity to change, because we will say, look at this terrible thing you did. Oh, you should be better. And then they'll be better and we'd be like, nah, you being fake. Okay, do you want them to change or not? The original CEO is gone. I believe he left in 2014 or something, replaced with a woman, which I'm not saying that a woman CEO is the end all be all, because I actually have worked under a terrible woman CEO before. But this CEO, this current CEO, is seemingly taking the company in a much better direction. As Abercrombie and Fitch themselves have put it, she turned the lights up and turned the music down.
You don't want your brand to run white hot, because white hot brands always burn out.
As for me personally, I still get super happy, nostalgic, young, wild, and free thoughts when I think about my time working for the A&F brand. Whenever I walk by a Hollister or walk by an Abercrombie and Fitch, I think of that young, wild, and free moment in my life, and that will forever be synonymous with my time working at Hollister. I only have good memories. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry that my experience was different than other people's. I had a great time working there, so I only have positive memories. As always, I want to hear your thoughts on this if you have any. Happy New Year, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye. Wow, I just did my first video of 2025. This is not gonna be the first video that goes up, but it's the first video I recorded. Wow, how exciting. Y'all see my little YouTube play button in the back? I was gonna say it's not a real play button. It is a real play button. It is from YouTube, but I didn't get it because I had a certain number of subscribers. I got it for being in the YouTube partner program. Fun fact, sometimes they just be like, you want some free shit? And they send you stuff. I don't know what they sending to people who like really up there, but for my little old channel, they were like, you want a little YouTube, what is it? Lego play button set? And I was like, yeah, and I had just hit 5K. And I was like, this is gonna be my 5K play button, even though they don't technically have a 5K play button. I considered that mine because it was literally like I got 5K and then they were like, you want this? And I was like, yeah, YouTube, I do want that actually. I'm gonna see if I can show that ad in here without getting flagged.
I got hands full of hope. I get bands full of show. You want chance after chance after chance, nigga. No.
And what is my intro, bitch? I've been doing Vlogmas for so long. Alexa girl, please. It is a 6 a.m. babe. I don't even remember what he said. Oh, they had a strong preference for white people, that's what he said. I say firing or hiring. Ooh, this video gonna be long boy. Y'all like Glorilla? I usually don't listen to music like this, but something about her, I'm like, I listen to this. I'm gonna see how I feel about recording with this as a backup mic, using this as my main mic. It's gonna look a little double mic-y right now. Where the hell is my mouse? All right, let's get into it. We talking about Abercrombie and Fitch. They want a stupid bitch. And do. I got somewhere to be, little baby. I'm important. Plus, I love the way she says music. It's not right, but it's so funny. All right, let's do it.